Oh my God. Oh my God. There is nothing. There is nothing. I have put myself in a bit of a predicament. You see, I'm in California this week, as you can see, and I'm going to be doing a lot of driving. I'm probably going to do over 1,400 miles in a week. My girlfriend's with me. I'm going to be visiting family, so I'm going to need something fun, but also practical and reliable. So some things that come to mind are a Lucid Air Sapphire that's pretty practical and an absolute ripper. A BMW X5M, that's also pretty fun and very practical, lots of space. Heck, even a Model 3 Performance would be a pretty good choice. But then my Porsche contact told me there's a GT4 RS available, so the decision was quite clear. This is the first time I'm getting to spend some quality time with a Porsche powered by a GT engine. So on one hand, I am thoroughly excited. On the other hand, I'm a little bit nervous as this is going to be my only car for doing drives over 500 miles and things like that. And my girlfriend wasn't a fan of the last Porsche I had on the channel, the Carrera T. Apparently that was a bit too rough, so I'm not anticipating this one to be a lot better. So I'm going to take you on this journey with me driving the GT4 RS for a week to find out what you have to do to make this thing livable, because we all know it's a track monster and it sounds like the heavens calling down upon you, but can you actually daily drive this thing? Like, can you actually do it? Let's find out. So when talking about like a supercar or a race car, one of the things that a lot of people bring up is that you can't really fit anything inside of it, but let me show you this. Inside the GT4 RS, we have two full-size carry-ons, and let me just show you that I can actually close it. Let me make sure I can actually do that. Okay, let me fix that. Okay, now we should be good to go. Just takes a little bit of elbow grease. I did not damage the car at all. The car's perfectly fine, but we got it in there. And then, of course, the Cayman is technically a hatchback. So in the back, we have my book bag, some shoes, some more bags, like other stuff that we bought along the time that we've been here in LA, and that closes perfectly fine. And so yeah, we are absolutely cooking with storage space in the GT4 RS. I've been so happy with how much stuff we've been able to fit in here, and it'll do perfectly fine for carrying all the things we need during this trip. Now it's time to fuel up, because this girl's thirsty. Oh yeah. Another thing that's an absolute game changer in this car, front axle lift. Without this, I would be screwed in a lot of situations. No scraping. And we are filling up. So when I first got the car, I had an estimated 300 miles on a full tank in the GT4 RS. So it's gonna be about 350-ish miles to get to our destination from here. So we're gonna see how fuel efficient it really is. I'm definitely gonna take it easy once we get on the long straights. So something that definitely takes practice is getting in and out of the car. You definitely have to do butt first and then get in like that. It takes a while, but you know, I'm starting to get the hang. But this is going to be one of the first of a few long drives ahead, so let's get it. One of the very first things you'll notice about this car versus a regular 718 is, yeah, it's a mid-engine car, so it's right behind you, directly behind you, but because this is basically a street legal race car, you'll notice there's so much chatter, like mechanical chatter going on directly behind you, all these weird noises. I remember when I first got in the car, and my girlfriend was like, is the car supposed to sound like that? Like, I think she thought it sounded like off, and no, that is exactly how it's supposed to sound, because this is essentially a street legal race car. And so this is definitely not a quiet comfort cruiser, which I don't think anyone expects, but there's definitely a lot more going on sound-wise outside of, you know, the engine itself than you would expect. Another thing that I noticed, which is honestly wild and something I've never experienced before with a car I've reviewed, is that it's incredibly easy to stall this thing in certain situations. So I've stalled this car probably like 5 or 6 times at this point, and you may be thinking, this is an automatic car, so how could you stall an automatic car? Well, I mean, this car is taking a bunch of different transmission components from other GT cars of the past, and so it really has a bespoke version of Porsche's PDK dual clutch transmission. And so when you're like reversing into an incline, like a driveway that's on an incline, you know, if you don't do it in a way that the gearbox likes, you can very easily stall the car. And so in our Airbnb where we stayed at, I stalled the car probably like 3 or 4 times just trying to back up into the driveway, which is wild. And so you just got to put it in park and restart the car and try again. It's kind of funny, honestly. This car has a lot of character. And speaking of character, that 4-liter, naturally aspirated, flat 6, directly from the 911 GT3. Everyone was like, you won't put a 911 GT3 motor in a Cayman body. And Porsche said, oh really? Watch this. But what makes this so much different than a GT3, for example, is the fact that you have the intake ducts right behind you. So you get so much pure engine and induction noise, like straight into the cabin. It is very loud. And for a lot of people, including someone next to me, it's not particularly enjoyable a lot of the time. And I have an exhaust button right here to open up the valves, and I've barely used it just because it's so loud in here already. Normally, I'm the type of guy to, when I get a car, I have it in maxed out Sport Plus mode like 100% of the time. I've barely put the transmission mode in Sport. I barely put the exhaust valves open. Like, it really, as is, without changing anything, is really intense. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. But we're gonna see how it fares as we're starting our 350-mile journey right now. All right, first pit stop in the GT4 RS. I think we cleared about 180 miles, and we've got about 170 left to go. So needless to say, we need a little bit of fuel, but I'm just under a half tank, which is pretty good. And as you can see, I've been getting absolutely annihilated. There's literally like hundreds of little dead bugs all over the car. And of course, you can see it right here on the windshield. I've just been getting blasted by bugs the whole way, but this is to be expected. Something I've honestly been a little bit terrified of is puncturing these Michelin Cup 2 tires, not only because they're expensive tires and it's not something you can easily replace on a dime at just like a, you know, off the road kind of tire rack situation, but to even get the wheel off, you need something that can handle this center lock situation right here. You don't have a standard 5-lug situation. These are center lock wheels, so you need specialist tools to be able to get this stuff off. But one thing that has been incredibly reliable, as usual, as you would expect, are these carbon ceramic brakes. Stop on a dime in no time. It's been absolutely great. So we're looking at $65 for 10.5 gallons to fill up the half tank on the GT4 RS. Make sure we don't have any more in there. Oh, we might have a little bit more. Okay, and we're basically full. So at the beginning of this video, I was talking about things you would need to make this thing livable. And so my initial plan was, I was expecting these carbon bucket seats to be like super uncomfortable and not livable at all. So I actually ordered a butt pads to kind of use, at least to give to her so she could use on the road trip, just in case it got a little bit too uncomfortable. But surprisingly, it's been fine for me. Has it? It's been good for you, right? Yeah, so I mean, we're like 200 miles in essentially, and it's been pretty solid, and I don't anticipate we're gonna need it. So surprisingly, the carbon bucket seats are not that bad. Would I have preferred to get the 18-way adjustable standard sport seats? I mean, yeah, but firstly, these look so much cooler, and they're actually not that bad. You have a little button on here that can adjust the height, so you can kind of see me going down a little bit right here. So I think it's perfectly fine, honestly. And like I said, they look absolutely sick. Gotta rip it one more time before I start calming it down. If you like Porsches or cars that drive like Porsches, and you want a car that sounds like amazing, I think this has to be the best Porsche ever made. I mean, you have the Carrera GT, which is, you know, their V10 supercar, right? But I mean, I don't think that offers that intoxicating, like you feel everything sort of sound that this car does. And yeah, it's loud in here. It's super loud. On these Michelin Cup 2s, you've got a lot of tire noise, you've got a lot of wind noise, but when you get on it, it's just like there's nothing like it. It's crazy. Another aspect of, livability, daily driving ability is suspension, right? So clearly we do not have some fancy schmancy air suspension setup like you've got in a Panamera or your, BMW 7 Series, something like that. Just like good old-fashioned coilover, steel springs, a true racing car setup. So how does that fare for driving around on everyday roads? Well, it can be pretty rough, and especially in a lot of parts of metropolitan Los Angeles, it's not great. A lot of like bumpy roads, and you're dodging a lot of potholes. The car is very low to the ground, and you've got big expensive tires on here that you don't want to mess up, so it can be kind of nerve-wracking a little bit. You definitely have to be super conscious about how you drive this car on normal roads that most of the time are not going to be well paved unless you're on a long, boring kind of freeway like we are right now. We're on the 5. Would I want to deal with the suspension setup of this car every single day, dealing with it in traffic, things like that? When experiencing other cars that have fantastic, super smooth rides, I wouldn't prefer it necessarily, but could I do it? I mean, yes, I think. All right, so we made it to our destination. This is the Redwood Road, or Redwood Forest, whatever you want to call it. It probably has an official name that I'm not remembering right now, but we made it. Almost 400 miles in the GT4 RS, and yes, it was a little loud, and at times it was a little rough on the road, but we made it, and the car, came in perfectly fine condition, which is good to see. But I just want to take a minute to appreciate how this thing looks. I haven't really talked about that at all in this video. This is one of the sickest looking cars I've ever had on the channel, one of the sickest looking cars I've ever driven, and it's just a Cayman with a race body kit on it, essentially. You've got all this crazy aero stuff going on. You've got these inserts in the hood. You've got these fender canards. You've got these massive intake vents on the side of the door here. And obviously the massive wing. You cannot forget about the massive wing. We've got the satin blue wheels with the center locks on them. And then you've got all this crazy aero stuff going on around the entire car. This car has a lot going on. And so while this is a super extreme, basically legal race car for the road, it's essentially still just a Cayman at the end of the day, and Porsche Caymans are pretty common, especially out here in California, and so it's not the most attention-grabbing car outside of people who really know and understand and appreciate what this car is and what it can do, which is super cool, because a part of daily ability is being able to use this thing every day without having to feel like you're a celebrity, like, kind of like how the Cybertruck is right now. You really can't go anywhere with that thing without everyone staring at you, taking photos of you, things like that. In this car, you really can do it. It really does fly under the radar. Usually whenever someone notices this thing, it's usually someone giving me a thumbs up or honking when driving by, because they know this is the GT4 RS and this is one of the coolest cars that Porsche has ever made. But if you know what Redwood Road is, you know this is a road where you can have a lot of fun driving, and that's exactly what we came here to do. So enough yapping about the car on the outside. Let's get inside, turn this thing on, and let's go. So what has surprised me about the GT4 RS? Honestly, overall, I'd just say how livable the car actually is. This is an extreme car. This is basically a road legal race car, don't get me wrong. And there are some people who simply would not be able to live with this car. One of the main reasons is noise. This car is not quiet by any means. You could put an 100-pound muffler on this thing and it would still be one of the loudest cars you'll ever drive, just because of the intakes coming right into the car. So you can just hear everything going on. Even when crawling in traffic and stuff like that, there's so much mechanical chatter going on in this car. You hear literally everything. There isn't a lot that you don't hear in this car. You're using basically track tires, Michelin Cup 2, so you get a lot of road noise. The suspension is very firm, so you feel every single bump and rivet in the road. But despite all of that, I've managed to drive this car every single day for almost a full week doing pretty much anything and everything with this car, sitting in long stints of LA traffic, taking it up into the canyons. I took it up to Angeles Crest the other day. Now we're in a kind of somewhat bumpy but very fun and dynamic woodsy forest driver's road, and this car is just incredibly versatile, honestly, despite the rough around the edges aspects like the harsh suspension and, you know, the noisy cabin. It's so freaking capable, this car, and all of the pluses of this car honestly outweigh a lot of the cons. Do I think this could be your only car to drive every single day and you not be a little burnt out by it a little bit? No, I don't think you could have this be your only car. But let's say you've got like a Model 3 or something super simple, or like, you know, an Audi Q5, like a very simple, you know, practical kind of car that you can use to have more than one other person in the car as like your secondary, or even just like a simple beater, like, you know, an old BMW X3 or something like that. I feel like you only would need one other car to, you know, complete this collection and have all of your needs met. But that also depends on what your needs are. Everyone has basically said this. I'm pretty late to the game with reviewing the GT4 RS, but which is no fault of my own. They just don't have any of these out on the East Coast. But you really do just tell this car to jump and it says how high. You gotta make sure the tires are warmed up first. You gotta make sure the engine has been warmed up a little bit, but once you're going, you're going. And there's no situation where I've ever felt like this car is not capable of handling what's about to happen. Like, the last car I had on this road was the Maserati MC20, and granted, that is a pretty phenomenal car, a little bit expensive, a little bit overpriced if you ask me, given its competition, but it's a pretty phenomenal car. And it doesn't handle these roads nearly as well as this thing does. Granted, it's a slightly bigger car, you know, but it's still mid-engined with, you know, a lot of horsepower and pretty solid handling, but it doesn't hold a candle to this car in any dynamic, you know, intense cornering situation. This is the ultimate driver's car. I think I can definitively say that. You really just tell it to jump. The GT4 RS says how high. There's nothing this car can't do in terms of driving. It can do it all on a road. Something else that I honestly found wild with this car is how often I was able to stall the car. You know, I'm in Northern California now, which is very hilly, lots of intense inclines, and, you know, trying to maneuver around spaces, man. I've stalled this car probably 10 plus times at this point. Oh, we got a long straight coming. Yeah, the stalling has been weird, but man, other than that, this car is phenomenal, man. This car is truly phenomenal. And so, the question at the end of the day is, can you actually daily drive this thing? Can you live with a GT4 RS and drive one, you know, every single week? Out here in California, I would say the answer is yes. You just have to be willing to put up with a pretty rough ride most of the time. If you live in an area where the roads are pretty well paved all the way throughout, then I'd say go for it, man. I'd say go for it. I'm incredibly happy to have driven this car, not only because it's freaking awesome, but because this is the last Cayman that's going to ever be like this. There's no other Cayman that's ever going to be as cool as this, as extreme as this, at least as far as I know. I'm, you know, pretty sure the electric Cayman is right around the corner, and so the ICE version is probably going to sing its swan song pretty soon, and that makes me incredibly sad. I'm just going to turn it off for a second. Makes me incredibly sad. Man, if you could afford this car and you love Porsches and you love driving, I think this is the best one. The 911 ST, haven't driven that one yet, and if you need a manual experience, you know, that's something this car doesn't offer. But this car does offer the quirks of a manual in the sense that, It feels like a manual when driving it in certain situations. You know, the clutch can be kind of finicky. You can very easily stall the car in certain situations, which is really funny. Yeah, man. I think I need to do another lap. I can't believe I only have like 3 more days left with this car. This is going to be one of these driving experiences that I'll never forget. And shout out to Porsche for hooking this up. Okay, I think that's about it. I think I've answered all of the questions I need answering. If you have any other questions about this car, I'll definitely be in the comments hanging out, so feel free to ask anything. But it's time to go have another lap. All right. Talk to you guys in the next one.